This is TV Podcast Industries talking about Star Trek Picard, Season 2, Episode 3, Assimilation. Welcome back, fellow Trekkers, Trekkies, and trekking enthusiasts. This is TV Podcast Industries, and we're talking about the third episode of Star Trek Picard Season 2, Assimilation. I'm one of your hosts, Chris, and I'm joined by my illustrious crewmates, my Chief of Operations, and my Chief of Security. Gentlemen, please introduce yourselves to our guests.
Am I Chief of Security because I hold all the passwords?
I don't recognise any of those. I always thought I would be Chief Scientific Officer.
Probably. Well, Chief of Operation is definitely our producer extraordinaire, Derek.
Yes. There you go. Yeah. The engineer. Yes.
I don't think I would be very good on security.
You could be, John.
No,
you could be.
I really wouldn't.
No, see, you're the red shirt.
Oh, that means...
Oh, thanks.
You're the sacrificial lamb for us in command.
Well, there you go. I am one of your co-hosts, Derek.
Hello, and I am one of your other hosts, John. Yes. Hello, fellow Trekkies and Trekkers.
Yes. Great to be back for the third episode of Star Trek Picard.
It really is. It is definitely a show that is heating up. It is a show that has the buzz is increasing kind of as the episodes go forward, and obviously we were recording this slightly ahead of the release of the show. I was surprised in a good way with the overall enthusiasm that the premiere got across kind of the buzz, the social media, and the actual backing it got from a lot of the cast members, which didn't just feel like your standardized kind of PR, marketing, social media play. These felt a bit more personal to a lot of the cast, I think. Kind of, we're like, hey, here's some behind the scenes. I'm not supposed to show you this episode 8 still. And I'm like, why did you show me an episode 8 still?
They clearly enjoyed filming this season, and they also clearly enjoy working together, this cast. You know, I suppose it's a big event series. We kind of haven't spoken about it much, but Star Trek Picard in itself, obviously the return of Patrick Stewart is a big thing, but it's also a 3-season arc. There will be a third season of the show, but that is the end of the show as well. I think they're in filming right now for season 3. So at the moment, they're kind of getting together for the final time. Yep. And the show's finally being released to the audience because there was a big delay with the COVID filming, and the gap that's in there. So everybody's finally getting to see the work that they did all together, and they're all together for the final time as well at the moment. So, so it must feel like a big moment for them when everybody gets to see that premiere. So it has been fun watching their socials. Definitely.
Yeah. Definitely. And, as of recording, like we're doing this on the 5th of March, next week is a lot of the last weeks. So we've had wrap episodes kind of happen wrap days happen for a number of the actors. Right. And they're sending those photos. Today was my last ever day on set for Picard season 3. That's a wrap on me, or that's a wrap on X person or Y person. And you're seeing those as well. And so apparently next week is the last official day on sets. And then it's fully wrapped and going into post-production, post-effects, all that fun and games. So they're way further into production than I assumed. Right. Which is great.
Yeah, absolutely.
But we're not here to talk about season 3, are we? No. We're here to talk about season 2. And more importantly, episode 3, Assimilation. So gentlemen, let's jump in. Let's dive in. Let's go back to let's go to the future and then go back to the past.
There you go.
And go to the past by talking about a future episode. There we go. Really confusing.
Yes.
With all that, Derek, do you want to tell us who gave us what with the episode details?
Of course. Yes, the writer for this episode was Kylie Rossetter and Christopher Monfette. We mentioned Christopher Monfette last week. He was one of the writers in episode 2. And Kylie Rossetter was a season 1 writer's room assistant for Star Trek Picard and has now got a writing credit on the show. So
great stuff.
I love when people move along the writer's path in this show and in any of the shows that we cover. It's really nice to see people staying on board and kind of using their experience that they would have learnt on the show in the past to aid in writing a major episode for the show. And nothing more major than this episode, I think, because you have such big moments with such big characters. So well done, Kylie.
Yeah, definitely.
And this episode was directed by Leah Thompson. Yes, that Leah Thompson from Back to the Future. How interesting is that?
That's a nice little sort of joining or collision of the stars, isn't it, really?
Isn't it? I think that's really, really, really cool. She has many, many credits to her name over the many, many years, but I haven't seen her direct any Star Trek episodes before, but it was really fun seeing her post pictures of herself in the director's chair for an episode going back in time. How cool is that? John, do you want to tell us what they gave us with your synopsis for episode 3 of Star Trek Picard, Assimilation?
Sure. As Seven, Rafi, Picard, Juratti and Rios work together to escape the Confederation, the Borg Queen connects herself to La Serena and transports the crew to 2024. The power used to travel through time and the gravitational pull of Earth causes La Serena to crash land. At the crash site, the Borg Queen has entered a stasis and diverts all power to her recovery. Needing to obtain more details on the exact time and place in 2024 Los Angeles, as well as how to find the elusive Watcher, the decision is made that the Queen must survive, but at a cost to Elnor, who dies in Rafi's arms when he succumbs to his injuries. An angry Rafi transports out with 7 of 9 and Rios in an attempt to track the Watcher, while Picard and Juratti stay on board La Serena. In a dangerous move to reawaken the Borg Queen, Juratti is partially assimilated so that she can extract the information about the disruption to the timeline, which impresses the Borg Queen. Elsewhere in downtown Los Angeles, with Rios injured and separated from Rafi and 7 of 9, the two of them manage to make some headway to find the Watcher, but Rios is arrested as a suspected undocumented migrant by ICE officers.
Well, there you have it, ladies and gentlemen. Ice, ice, baby. I had to get that in. Just anytime I hear it, I'm like, doom, 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 doom.
I love it.
That's their corporate jingle.
That is ice, ice, diddle, diddle. Anyway, let's get into what can only be described as an interesting episode.
I was just going to say that, remember, Vanilla Ice was actually sued by Queen for ripping off their tune for that song back in the 90s. And Chris, you definitely wouldn't be getting a copyright strike from Queen for using their tune.
Everyone thinks I can't carry a tune. All of our kind of fellow Trekkers and Trekkies think I can't do it. Secretly, it's just I'm trying to get past algorithms that will give us copyright strikes. I'm just different enough that everyone's like, yeah, it's all right.
Well, it's definitely working, Chris.
Thank you. I am glad it's helped. But you know what is also working? Our structure. Yes, on this Picard season, we are going through back to our kind of top 3 points, but essentially very quickly, top 3 moments, our prime directive, the biggest moment for the episode, our medium moment, the Omega directive, and of course, our general order, which is just something we want to kind of get it in. So let's jump into our general orders, our small moments, and we'll make it so.
Make it so, number 1.
Okay, so who wants to go first with their general order?
Me. I want to go first. My small moment is just the phaser power levels here. Obviously there's a big thing that happens to Elnor in this episode, which we'll get to further down, are sort of directives and points of the show. But lucky for Elnor that, the phaser blast coming from the first husband, it injures him and he has quite a big hole in his chest. Mm-hmm. But when those phasers are turned back onto the Confederation officers by the crew of La Serena, it's effectively just complete disintegration. Yeah. So I was like, I'm glad the first husband set his phaser to, a huge gaping hole in the chest, sort of level. Because ultimately, I guess Elnor's demise in this episode would would have happened in episode 2. It would have just been kind of like, a Voldemort poof moment, really. So it was, I was just kind of, I thought that was quite interesting that once the phasers were set their sights on the bad guys, they went a little bit more destructive.
They certainly did. Yeah.
Set phasers to, oh my god,
Exactly.
crispy. So we obviously don't watch these together, and I saw that, and I even went, interesting. Someone twiddled with the literal knob in the corner, just went, crank this to 11. Poof. I was like, because what I was expecting was just a few, essentially, a few crispy holes in the body for these other people too.
Yeah.
Not, like, literally, as you say, that inside out melting.
Exactly. I mean, in fairness, I didn't see where all the phasers kind of got knocked to or taken, so I didn't know which phasers were being used. So maybe the turn you to ash level on the phaser were coming from the 2 guards that came with the first husband, and his was more just I don't know.
He wants to wound.
Exactly. He wants to keep them alive ultimately, and they're sort of the backup in case it really sort of goes belly up, which it did, and unfortunately, they weren't much use. So, in all honesty, it could have just been that it was the 2 Confederation Guards phasers that were used on all 3 of them, and so that's why they returned to ash, and Elnor just got a huge gaping wound in his chest.
So security officers have their phasers set to disintegrate effectively.
Well, and I guess in the Confederation there is no stun setting because they're not really the kind of let's stun them kind of guys, really.
Well, you even hear that from the first husband saying, why do you care about Elnor? I thought a safe galaxy was a human galaxy kind of thing. So he is definitely of the opinion that everybody has a weapon pointed at them should be dead when he pulls the trigger kind of thing. That is the attitude he goes for. Wanted to just call out that moment as well, how he finds out that Annika is not his actual wife. She probably should have Googled his name, shouldn't she?
Yeah.
What's my full name? I don't know.
Cutie McCuter Pants. There you go, honey.
Yeah.
Oh, that's true. So Google is in the Confederation timeline, but not in the Federation. So Google it is evil. Okay. Right.
It is the darkest timeline, John.
It is the dark timeline. So
it really is.
I guess Facebook's there as well.
I'm certain Facebook's
Sorry,
there,
but then what about Meta? Let's go really.
Sorry, that's what I meant.
Yes,
Meta. Oh yeah, I keep forgetting Meta is a thing. Right, but on that meta note, Chris, what is your general order?
Yeah, mine's a quick one. It's as they're crashing. So the ship is crashing. Rios is like trying his best to kind of essentially drop them safely. And the decision is, oh God, we're about to drop into a very populated city of Los Angeles. Probably not a good idea. So what we have is Picard takes the controls and directs them to somewhere else and goes, I'm taking us home.
Yes.
This was slightly confusing.
Yes.
Because he crashes them into what looks like an abandoned kind of forest tree area.
You mean a forest?
Yes, exactly. Sorry, I can't see the trees through the forest.
I don't have the abandoned forest.
The abandoned forest, that's a forest. Yeah, there you go. He crashes them into this kind of area. But my assumption was he was taken to the Chateau Picard. Yeah. But that's in a different continent. And I'm like, okay, is it Chateau Picard in California? Has he like kind of moved to, he's basically gone to the Wine Valley, and he's basically crashed him into Napa Valley Picard. It's the Picard 2.0.
Yeah.
Or did he actually just completely steer them across the globe into Paris or into France and drop them there?
Yeah, I'm just not sure of this because it is quite difficult to find out exactly what this means because you're right. It isn't laid out specifically in the episode, and I'm sure there are Star Trek fans who are shouting at us right now for not knowing for definite what this is. My understanding is that Chateau Picard is in Bordeaux,
Yeah,
that was mine. There is that historical reference to the Picards being French, obviously with Jean-Luc.
Yeah.
And that's where I understand Chateau Picard is. But I know in the real world, there is a Chateau Picard in California.
In Napa Valley, in the wine country area of California.
I believe so. So when they were diverting from California and going there, I absolutely thought exactly as you did. Oh, they're crash landing in Chateau Picard, but I don't think they are, and I'm just not sure. I'm sure we'll find out in future episodes exactly where they're crash landed, and he'll explain this is where his family had a winery in this time, or we're setting up their winery, or something like that. But it is quite confusing because it doesn't seem to be in the right place in the world.
Yes.
So I'm on the complete other side from you two, whereas I think that's exactly where it is. It was diverted to Chateau Picard, which is in France. And that was it. I mean, it was very dark, but it looked like there was an abandoned house there.
Right.
There was obviously the woods and the forest. But for me, it was, yes, they did. Because Rafi, Rios, and Seven transport to Los Angeles, so they don't need to be next door. They don't need to be in California. They're transported into the city of Los Angeles from the ship.
Yeah.
And I'm taking her home because we saw in episodes 1 and 2 with the flashbacks to young Picard, it seems like the family move into the abandoned chateau, because they're in that conservatory. And there's all none of the windows have got glass. And so Picard knows that at this time, the chateau is an abandoned shell. So it's not going to cause any suspicion, I guess, because with a crash landed La Serena, because I think people in Napa Valley may just have noticed that,
Sure.
And you would probably go to sort of, just across the sci-fi streams, maybe Devil's Mountain or somewhere like that in the US. Or they would crash land in Area 51, somewhere where there's not that population. And so I just feel that at this moment in time, Picard knew that Chateau Picard, their future home, would be abandoned, that it would be, that there's the wilderness around it at this time in terms of the forest, so they can crash land relatively safely there.
I hope that's it. I really do hope that they've just diverted to France. It makes sense. It's a spaceship. It can travel anywhere on the planet that it wants to. It was just because they were saying, like 3 seconds beforehand, we can't crash land in LA. He takes the con, moves it slightly, and suddenly they're in an abandoned area. So if they've moved to France, fantastic. That explains it.
But the higher up you are in the atmosphere and then stratosphere, the tinier the adjustment, the bigger the move.
Yeah.
So that's why I think Picard was we've only got a short window, give me the con controls, right. And he does it. So that, he can change the trajectory at which the La Serena crash lands.
Yeah.
Interesting. Potentially it is because we had the flashback nightmares to Chateau Picard where there was an evil entity, a woman, a potential evil entity. Remember we see the nightmare with his mother.
Yeah.
And he's getting pulled. What if the Borg Queen is still in Chateau Picard back in the nightmare when he joined? So that's why they're in the basement of Chateau Picard. There's a broken, busted ship.
I like it.
Under Chateau Picard in the current future. And when, literally Picard moves in as a kid, the Borg Queen is there already. And that's why he had nightmares. Because the Borg Queen was, oh my god, if they do this, that's cool.
Yeah.
Because then that's
exactly. And that's why the Borg Queen knows what his mother said to him whilst they're there. That's why or at least collectively, I guess it comes across because, of course, Borg can,
oh my god,
they share all the information.
Ooh, interesting theory.
Because the mother was pulled by some entity, and potentially that's the tentacles of the Borg Queen. Okay, cool. Let's see if they're just in the Napa Valley and we got it all wrong. Oops. But now we have a great fan fiction in our head.
I like it, guys. Very good, very good. Speaking of the Borg Queen, that is my general order for the episode, my small moment. I love how the scene where the Borg Queen falls over and breaks out of her chains and then crawls across the floor to Juratti. I love how this is filmed. It really feels horrific. Like, effectively, she's crawling like some kind of insect across the ground towards Juratti, and I love how it's filmed. I thought it was really creepy. Juratti in herself generally tends to be quite a nervous character as well, so putting her in the scene with the Borg Queen works really, really well. Playing the two of those off against each other. And I love, effectively, it's her coming back to her power. Like, they talked about it in the second episode when we came to the Confederation about them capturing the last of the Borg, and that she's still really dangerous. They still have to keep her under major security until they terminate her because she's still dangerous. There's still a possibility that she could come out and form a new Borg effectively because she still has all that power within her. So that's all encapsulated in the scene of how scary it must be. Like, Juratti's trying to hook her up to La Serena using the equipment in the ship, and then you see the Borg Queen stepping up and plugging herself in and taking over the entire ship and being in full control. You can hear the kind of terror in Rios as well. What if the Borg Queen isn't going to do what she agreed to do with them? What if she takes over the ship and kills them all and turns them into the new Borg? It's all in this scene and played really well. The Borg have always been great horror characters within Star Trek for me. I've always really enjoyed those episodes because they tend to play them horrifically.
Definitely.
And I think this was done so well.
Yeah, she was really menacing in that little scene. I thought it was really good. I also like that, there is the menace and all that, but I did like that the Borg Queen, whether it is known to her or not, has a sense of humor, because there is that fantastic moment once she comes back and becomes sentient and lucid later on in the episode, where she says to Picard, "What I want is legs, but until then, I want your ship." And I thought that was a great line. I really, really enjoyed that little bit of dialogue.
Absolutely. Well, that was my small point for this episode.
Lovely. Excellent.
So then, let's move on to our Omega Directive.
Implement the Omega Directive immediately.
Okay, so who wants to go first? What about you, John? Go on, continue the streak.
I will take it. My meeting moment is the time travel, the slingshot. It's just really, coming off the back of the creepy Borg Queen and then plugging herself in. She just takes control. I love her two sort of green missiles to the two remaining Confederation ships. It seems as though she did that with relative ease once she was plugged in, whereas you got the sense with 7 of 9, you got the compliment from Rios that it was a real difficult shot to take.
Yes,
and she just fires 2 of them off, and we see the 2 final pursuing Confederation ships blowing up. But we then get this slingshot around the sun, her calculating the trajectory, and I just thought it was really, cool. I loved the whole scene of them skirting the surface of the sun, the tear rolling around Juratti's cheek. I think it was just all the different slow motion as they sort of enter into the wormhole that's been created and pop out into 2024. But also, some of the opening credits made sense, which was really nice, where you see the ship going along kind of the grid pattern, which is all the time travel, and you see the wormhole, the 2 parts of the funnel, which then turns into that egg timer with the Borg Queen in it. So it's just a real nice link there in the opening credits as well, I thought, which finally kind of made sense there to me, where you see the wormhole turning into the egg timer and the Borg Queen in that egg timer. So I just thought it was a really great moment. And then also that they come out of it and, the ship's not in a good condition ultimately, and it gets caught by Earth's gravitational pull, and it has to crash land, and they've got power issues. It felt kind of realistic after all that stress. You hear Rios going, it's warp 8, warp 9, and did they reach warp 11? That strange warp level that doesn't appear on any of the digital readouts.
Oh, yes, the La Serena goes up to 11.
Yeah.
Yes, I see it. Very cool. Yeah, well, it was a really good scene. Really liked it. And again, as you say, I love the fact that it takes its major toll on the Borg Queen as well. She is knocked out of action effectively by doing this. And, you know, it is a callback to previous time travel in the Star Trek world. Picard specifically mentions that Kirk has done this before with his crew and Spock.
Yeah, many times.
So a few times. But yes, really, really good to show that, because while time travel is in this world, and we talked about it in previous episodes, time travel is in Star Trek. It's not an easy thing to do. And they want to make sure that it is clear. This isn't something that you just do a jaunt back to whenever you need to fix a problem. It is something that takes a lot of power and a lot of effort to do. So they accomplish that with this scene, that it is something very difficult.
Yeah. So. And a special kind of guy or gal, I guess.
Well, yes.
Whether it's Spock or the Borg Queen.
Yes.
Can you imagine?
I that was the one thing, and it's always just a weird bit to me. So the genius level intellect of Spock was on par with, in other words, he can make the same calculations that a living computer essentially could.
Yeah.
Which is, I always, like, as soon as that was said, I was like, I'm assuming she could probably do it slightly faster and or better.
Well, yeah.
Like, just in my opinion, because it's a Borg versus a human intellect, or sorry, not in this case, a Vulcan intellect. Well, a Vulcan human hybrid intellect.
Yes.
Excuse me.
Yes. The
Getting
best
it
of both
correct. But yeah, that was one I was like, interesting.
Yeah.
I'll jump in very quickly, if that's okay, into kind of my moment, which is that Rafi and Seven are meet up in the past, and we kind of get a bit of, I would start to say, a rekindling of their whatever they had. Kind of, they were at one point kind of like in love very much, but then Seven went back to work with the Fenris Rangers, and Rafi took her kind of her piece and place across back in Starfleet, and we kind of got this. We got the sense that they had broken up, and that there was a fight around commitment and responsibility and things like that.
Yeah, it's interesting. I'm not sure whether they broke up. It was almost like Rafi was saying they were still together, but Seven was committed to going out with the Fenris Rangers, and that was more important to her than the relationship. And it's kind of like they were on a break, let's say, rather
they
than
were on
they
a break.
Yeah, it's kind of like they're still together. It's not like Seven's gone off with somebody else and Rafi's gone off with somebody else. They're still kind of together but can't be together, is the way it kind of felt.
It wasn't an acrimonious split, you know, they just decided to go their separate ways. They still have feelings. I think it's fairly chill, shall we say.
Okay. There you go. Yeah.
Okay. Because I started to see that this was then a rekindling because of the pain and the loss of that Rafi is feeling. Because when we do see them up in the tower, there is that kind of I don't even know how to. There was this chemistry between them that we saw in season 1.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then over episode 2, we started to kind of see it, like that ribbing that Rafi would give Seven, obviously first and foremost with like just the husband aspect, the married aspect. Like it was fun. And then when they first meet up, and Rafi has just basically almost curb stomped this guy with the gun, the Glock, or whatever kind of gun it was. They make that joke, and I'm like, and then Rafi's just shuts it down. She's got stuff to do. Let's get going. But up in that tower, when they are overlooking Los Angeles, looking for this, the Watchers, because we're going to see basically Wathu kind of be there. Sorry, that was a Marvel joke for any of our Trekkies who aren't comic book readers, or anyone who doesn't watch What If on Disney Plus. But anyway, moving fast on.
Let's say it was a reference rather than a joke.
Okay, yes, a reference, an Easter egg. There you go. Better.
Yeah, there you go.
I started to see this rekindling, and I was very happy because I'm hoping that through the loss and the suffering that they feel in this throughout this season, that we do get a better a better ending for these two, because I did
absolutely.
always like that in season 1.
Yeah, absolutely. And I suppose that's it. I think there was a little bit of criticism in season 1 that it got to the end of the season and you see kind of a hand touch between Rafi and Seven, and it hadn't really been built up throughout the season. There's a year and a half later now. They've had a relationship. They're broken up because they're in 2 different places. They've gone off in their separate ways. But you would get the understanding that if they were crewmates on a ship together, that they probably would still have a relationship. And that's kind of where they are now. They're on a mission together. They're able to be together. So, potentially they'll be able to rekindle that relationship. That'd be nice to have, because there's certainly love between the two of them.
Yeah, absolutely. It was a nice moment. I also like that, because we're seeing, Seven, constantly looking, in the mirror at herself or in her reflections because she doesn't have the Borg implants there. And so I really like, the notion of the security guard taking the picture and them looking back at it, and that Seven is smiling. Her kind of fairly severe demeanor, it has slipped because, in some senses, I guess, she's feeling free of that judgment that everyone makes when, we saw in episode 1 because of the Borg implants. So again, that was a nice thing around her own kind of self-awareness, and, her confidence, I guess, because, it was made a little bit of a big thing in episode 1, all the stirs are aboard the Stargazer from the other Federation crew.
Absolutely.
And with the attack on La Serena by the space pirates that are trying to get the medical supplies that are destined for the Fennec Rangers. So I really like this side of it as well. And for Rafi, I think, as you say, it's that they're back together again, not necessarily in any kind of committed relationship, but they have feelings. They're, first and foremost, they care about one another, and Rafi has just gone through a fairly traumatic event on La Serena as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's an interesting concept here as well. They've gone back in time to fix whatever Q's done in 2024 and get back to their future. Rafi's idea is that if they get back to their own timeline, then Elnor's going to be there.
Yes.
And I wonder if Annika, this version of Seven here that's no longer a member of the Borg and doesn't have all those Borg implants, will she keep those if they get back to their timeline? Or will she go back to the way she was before and have the Borg implants and have all that experience? Because it would be interesting for Annika now to be human Annika, never part of the Borg and never looked at as she has been for these past number of years, by everybody else thinking of her as just a former Borg. So it'll be, that's kind of interesting. Will she go back when they do resolve this problem? If they resolve it, I'm sure they will. If they resolve it, will she go back to their time as human Annika or not? So I wonder.
This is always the difficult thing with time travel when you add it into a sci-fi show. It's that kind of, they even call it out the butterfly effect.
Yeah.
In this. And I wonder, no matter what happens, there are going to be people that poo-poo the decision. So, like, everything will go, but when they go back, all things have been returned to normal. So Seven is Borg, Elnor is breathing. All of those things will be back to normal if they fix the time-space continuum. And everything is real. Or there is, like, they have made so many ruffles and like butterfly beats of the wings throughout, just crashing and doing these things, that there are going to be lasting repercussions. So that's just the timeline. But then the question becomes, is their souls, their mind, their memories of what they were and what had happened be transported back into the original bodies of them just before they leave? Or is it them returning? And then there's two Picards. There's the Picard of the original timeline and the Picard of the timeline who went back in time and then came back to the future. So it's the timey-wimey. It's this, you're never going to fully no one's ever going to be 100% happy with how this do, because unfortunately this is science fiction and everyone has an opinion about what science fact is and how it works. But unfortunately, time travel is not real as of right now. So,
or is it, Chris?
Or is it? Yeah.
Or is it? If one of us was a time traveler, we'd be able to tell you how the rest of the series plays out.
It's true.
So we're not time travelers. But I suppose that, yes, the central premise of this is that Q did something in 2024. Everybody that was on that ship being attacked by the Borg that we saw in episode 1 has changed in some way. So they've all changed because of this change that happened in 2024. If that's resolved, then they're back in that moment exactly where they were. Does that mean they've literally just set the self-destruct on La Serena and they're all going to die anyway when they get back to their timeline? We don't know. So we will see that as it goes on. But it is an interesting question because Rafi's idea is if they solve the timeline, then Elnor comes back. But does that mean everybody goes back to the way they were? Will Annika lose this human version of herself? Or is she just going to have that experience of what it's like to be human in this time in 2024? And maybe that will stick with her as some good memories that she has.
Yeah.
But a good point. Really, really like that point, Chris. Very good.
Yeah.
The one I wanted to call out as my Omega directive, my medium-sized point for the episode is Rios' story, in here. So they've been able to arrange a transport to go out and find the Watcher in LA, where Rafi and Seven are going. Rios is supposed to be transported to an area close to them. But I love the transporter malfunction that we see in here because I've not seen one like this before. Effectively, he's transported into the middle of the air on a building that probably doesn't exist for a couple of 100 years or something, is what's happened. So we see him being transported, hitting off a building, falling to the ground, and because of his injuries, he gets taken in by some doctors to try and help him out. What's really interesting about this is effectively he got a warning just before leaving the ship about two things. Blend in and don't get arrested and don't get taken to a hospital. And effectively he does all of those things. There's even a reference to the fact that he's wearing clothes that would be out of place in 2024.
They call it out as we've just washed your weird clothes. Yeah, I mean, it's Rios the rebel rebelling against all the sage advice that had come from Rafi.
Yeah.
And Seven. So yeah, it was really, really good.
But all by mistake, in fairness. He isn't breaking the rules on purpose, of course.
No, that's true.
But I do like how it plays out, this idea that this is a healthcare service for illegal immigrants. Nobody needs to present any kind of papers to get seen by this in this place. It's unfortunate those kind of places have to exist, of course, but an interesting situation for Rios to be in. There's a temptation with these kind of time travel concepts that it's all about fish out of water. It's all about experiencing the timeline from a future that means you have no idea what's going on here. And this is something that they did in a comedy way back in Star Trek 4, where the members of Kirk's crew didn't understand how the world could work like this in the 80s. So it's interesting that they take a bit more of a serious look at it with what's going on with Rios and where he is, and the fact that there is an issue here with illegal immigrants and ICE coming in to effectively arrest anybody that's getting medical treatment and take them into custody and put them in prison because they're illegal immigrants. Like, that's one place you would think that they wouldn't go and arrest people who are getting medical attention, but it seems like this plan of the doctor to treat anybody that's ill, regardless of their status, has made her a target of ICE.
Yeah, it's a go-to for them, that they'll go around these types of clinics. They'll go around to other different places as well that would tend to have the undocumented migrants working there. So I think it's you can sense that. I like that, she's trying to get everyone out. Even Rios, who again decides to stay back. But he's had his fingers bandaged, so the ICE officer spots that and spots that he's not the doctor that he's pretending to be.
Yeah, and he certainly doesn't have 2024 papers telling them who he is.
No, he doesn't. So this was good. I liked as well that Rios has lost his comm badge. You know, he's separated from Rafi and Seven. So it's another kind of angle into 2024 LA here as well. You're seeing with Rafi and Seven that it's that kind of the ease of acceptance within LA of a female couple, and here on the other side of it is the ease at which people are willing to think that migrants are bad and are a threat in some way. So it's that different take on where 2024 is potentially in the mindset of the human race, because we hear that as well with Rafi transporting into effectively a homeless village and being mugged, and she mentions to Seven, she just can't comprehend a society that has so many inherent contradictions within itself that and were they're destroying the environment. They accept and tolerate homelessness. They accept and tolerate huge disparities in wealth, and that there is the warning that it does collapse, and that's where the Federation comes from.
Exactly.
In that respect. So it's seeing today's world, or near future world, through the lens of the ideals of Star Trek, which is always that great idea here, as something of a comparison.
Yeah, absolutely.
So we're basically, our society will collapse at some point. Will we be alive to see it? Maybe.
Or our society will go down the path and eventually create the actual Federation, not the Confederation. So hopefully we'll be down the lines of creating our own utopian Star Trek universe in the future.
Do we have that foresight? We will see.
We'll hope so.
Cool. So hold on, quick one. When was First Contact? And I know it was 1996 the film, but the First Contact bit, because that's when everything starts to go right for the world.
Yes, that's when the Borg tried to ruin the creation of the Federation, wasn't it? So that was 2063 is what my Google tells me.
There you go.
April 5th, 2063 is when the first contact happened between humans and Vulcans. But the Vulcans reached out to make first contact with Earth once they created the ability to warp, isn't it?
Yeah.
Once they created the functionality to add warp to their ship, and there is a concept that they were waiting for that moment and watching and waiting for that moment. And the person they're here to meet in 2024 is the Watcher, somebody that's watching on. Perhaps there is a Vulcan stationed on Earth in this time, waiting for that moment. Now, I always thought it was somebody watching from space, that they were obviously off planet watching, waiting for Earthlings to create the warp functionality, but it's possible. This is what I'm trying to work out. Who is the Watcher?
Yeah, well, we will definitely get to that later, because I have theories.
Interesting.
I have theories,
but I do like this concept in the show. On my point on Rios going out, because some of the things that kind of get left behind, the way Star Trek shows are now done with 10 episode seasons rather than 22 to 25 episodes when it used to be in Next Generation. There was a lot of the commentary about our world today is kind of left out or done in a much more condensed way than you used to get with 2 or 3 episodes back to back, that were kind of connected, talking about society, because you had so much more time to play with in a season. Now, because the shows are so much more condensed, it tends to be one big story and some little minor stories going on. One big thread that's talked about for 10 episodes, almost like a 10 episode movie. So it's good we're seeing, the group break up the way they are, so they can all have their own individual adventures. It's not just hanging on what's Picard's story for season 2 now. It is more about the crew this time, it feels. So everybody gets their moment. So having Rios off here on his own, not having his comm badge, so he's not in contact with everybody else, and having his own adventure and his own experience in this time is really interesting. And as you mentioned, Chris, having Rafi and Seven on their own, having their own adventure, and then also Juratti and Picard back on the ship, having their own experience and their own stuff going on that we haven't talked about yet, but that's also interesting, having them all break up and have their own experiences. So a good use of the episode, I think.
Yeah, no, agreed. But gentlemen, we have come to that time in the episode. Finally, yes. Let's get to the Prime Directive.
We must face the ramifications of the Prime Directive.
Yes, well, I'll jump in here with my Prime Directive. We've kind of skirted around the issue, but it is the big loss of the episode, the death of sweet, innocent, sexy Elnor from his wounds, which is and has kind of it has energized Rafi in this episode because as we've been talking about, if they fix time, will this bring Elnor back? And that's the big question here. In the same way as will Seven have or not have her Borg implants if they fix the timeline? And so there's huge stakes now resting on this. Not just the wider stake of correcting the timeline so an entity such as the Confederation doesn't evolve through society, but also because of the close relationship between Rafi and Elnor. I mean, we saw this all through the first 2 episodes. That their little tic-tacs between one another.
Really mother and son.
Yeah, really mother and son. This is, a deep loss for Rafi.
Absolutely.
And I thought this was really nicely done. It felt like a big punch. It felt like a big emotional punch.
Yep.
And of course, surrounding this is the decision being made around how to harvest the remaining power of La Serena to direct it to allow the Borg Queen to kind of come out of her stasis and sort of, I guess, deep sleep, or whether to keep it in the medical bay of La Serena so that it can keep Elnor alive. And the decision is made that they need the Borg Queen to get the information around the exact moments and place within LA 2024, but also potentially to get back to their own time, their moment in time. And so, this causes, and it's germinated a nice little moment of tension between Rafi and Picard here again, and we saw that in season 1 between the two of them as well. So this is kind of an interesting consequence of the death of Elnor as well.
Yeah, and it is a consequence. It's not as specific a decision as do we keep Elnor alive or do we direct power to the Borg Queen. That seems to be what Rafi is saying is you didn't have power to keep Elnor alive, and now you're making the decision to give all of the power to the ship to the Borg Queen. So it's not like Picard said, let him die, we need her alive, thankfully, because that would have been a big change for his character.
Exactly.
But Rafi's so consumed by the loss of Elnor, and because they were trying to make sure the ship didn't crash and they all didn't die in an explosion, she was left on her own without enough power for the equipment to keep Elnor alive.
Yeah, exactly.
So it's her loss that's putting the divide there and giving her this massive push to complete their mission as soon as possible. And maybe that means Elnor is alive. But I do like that moment where she's talking to Juratti and saying, does this mean if this is resolved, we go back to our time and Elnor's alive? And Juratti's going, well, I don't know. I can't say for certain that's possible. But Rafi effectively pushes that out of her mind, and she's going to do the only thing she can, which is complete this mission, and potentially that might save Elnor.
Yeah, and it's the chance, isn't it? So for Rafi, this is her working hypothesis for what she needs to do, and whether it works or not will become clear through the remainder of the season.
It's a big loss for the show to lose someone like Elnor, because he is the kind of heart we said last season, this young character who's finally joining Starfleet, the first ever full Romulan in Starfleet. It's quite a big thing to kill him off in this episode.
Oh, for sure. So I really hope he does come back. I don't want to see Elnor out of the 3-season arc, and this is before halfway, ultimately, of Picard as, you know, a whole series. So, it's really a big moment here. So that's my prime directive.
Yeah. I was shocked.
Yeah.
I think we even said it at the end of the last episode, would they kill off Elnor? And all of us kind of said, they wouldn't do that.
No, because he was so sad. He was the audience. He was the fan of Picard who knew all of Picard's exploits through his biography.
Yeah.
He was the young and enraptured, kind of wide-eyed audience member. But he was also, beyond that, kick-ass in a battle because Picard can't fight.
Yeah.
That's the problem. He's a 90-something-year-old man. You can't have Sir Patrick Stewart break a finger pretend punching someone. So you put Elnor in these kick-ass battles that, we saw in episode 2.
Yeah.
Where, he keeps taking all the punches and then gets told, all right, now you can go have your fun. And has his fun. So I was, amazed that they did this. And more so, amazed that they did this so soon. Because I don't think he's coming back. I think
Stop it, Chris. We won't hear any kind of
no,
talk
but let me
like
give you the rationale, right? you essentially... There's no stakes then. That's the problem. You remove the stake. It's the whole thing. Once you kill someone, they should stay dead and the consequences should be there.
That never happens in any major property.
It's true, but it's comic. If you think of comic books, I much comic book. No one stays dead.
Yeah.
That's the problem. And
I think sci-fi as well.
That's do you dislike comic books?
No.
Right,
but I much prefer it from a dramatic story standpoint, the consequences of this action kind of reverberating out, which is that kind of continued loss and emotional torment on Rafi as a character, because it will drive more... Honestly, it's going to drive more conflict, and from conflict breeds great dramatic scenes and story.
Well, I will say I'm kind of in between here. So it's Star Trek, it's a science fiction show, and usually quite hopeful and positive. Yeah. So from that side, I'd go, it's quite likely Elnor's going to come back. But I'm kind of on your side though, Chris, because I'm not sure Rafi's hypothesis could be correct. Elnor was there and he was killed. If you're dead, you're dead. So if they go back and fix the timeline in 2024 and go back to their regular timeline, Elnor's still dead. He's a member of the crew that's there and he's dead. So how does he come back? But then if they fix 2024, then the timeline where he was killed, the person who killed him doesn't exist. So hopefully that restores Elnor. So I'm kind of in between the two. I'm really hoping that we're going to get Elnor back because of the character being as cool as he is. I want to see him in the show, but I'm just not sure whether Rafi's hypothesis that this will definitely bring him back is going to be correct. Especially that's why Dr. Juratti has so much concern about saying that's definitely going to happen.
Agreed, but even if, because you're right, in the timeline, he's dead. Going back in time will not necessarily bring him back because that's his past is also now his future.
Exactly.
And so, but what we've got to remember is whilst the time travel might not bring him back, there is the synthetics. There's we've seen it with Picard. He dies.
Didn't think you were going there, but yes, that's
he
also
dies
possible.
He has been brought back, and most people are still. In fact, that's the interesting thing. I think at the moment that possibly I'm just not getting from Picard this season so far is because he ultimately is a synthetic with all his memories, and there is the higher level philosophical question of whether this is still Picard, but everyone is quite comfortable with it. It is, even though biologically, is a synthetic.
Yeah.
So there is the possibility of that route, I guess, if there is what's needed to do that. And that might be the ultimate reason why he doesn't survive, is because, you know, Picard was in the right place at the right time for a very quick transfer of all that information into the synthetic. Elnor is now dead, and there's...
You know, I now see the final episode of season 3 of Picard is basically the entire crew of La Serena are all now synthetics going off as a ship full of synthetics. Everybody's died and has been replaced by synthetics. I wasn't expecting you to go there on possibly that's how
I did.
Elnor is going to return. I'm not sure whether they'd use that, because there is the little bit of a joke in Star Trek Picard that Picard is a synthetic, but we don't have to mention it because he's a synthetic that has exactly the same history in him, exactly the same medical issues, except for the one that would kill him in that particular day, and he will live the exact same lifespan that Picard would have lived. He has no extra abilities, no extra strength, no extra ability to read faster or do anything that Data was able to do. He is just simply a synthetic, exact replica of Picard. So I'm not sure whether they'll get out of the path and replace another character on the show that way. I do think what's going to happen is they fix the timeline and Elnor comes back. I think that's likely what's going to happen.
Well,
unless the actor has moved on to another project.
Yeah, maybe.
And this is a way of writing him out of the show.
So the only other thing we keep forgetting is Mr. Clicky Fingers. Q. So
and there's Q.
And literally they could go back in the past, fix the past, get back to the future. Elnor's still dead. They've done Q's games, they played Q's games, and then Q at the end goes, here's your prize. Click, and then Elnor's back with them. That could be it. Like, that could literally, it will be, well, there was no real stakes, but okay, let's move forward, because the games, Q's games are games.
You see, I don't mind the no stakes with Elnor, because I feel the team that is here in Picard is phenomenal. And there's enough points of conflict or emotion or happiness and joy that can be created ultimately from this group in various different ways. So I just think he's a great addition, because ultimately we really just have, they're all humans, and he brings that other species into that grouping.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know it avoided by putting him out of the show here and killing him, it did avoid having to have that discussion of why a Vulcan or a Romulan is walking around in 2024 LA, so they don't have to have that explanation for why his ears look different and his eyebrows look different. So they have avoided that from a writing standpoint. Good way.
Do you know what's another way? Just a beanie. Beanie that covers his eyebrows or you go, it's LA.
Yeah,
people are a bit weird in LA. Good.
Exactly. He could set a new trend.
Exactly.
To get cosmetic pointy ears and shaped sort of frowny eyebrows.
But we do have a challenge in the character of Elnor. Remember, absolute candor, so he can't lie. So he wouldn't even be able to give the explanation that, I went into a tattoo parlor and had my eyebrows tattooed like this, and then I've gone down the path of turning myself into a pointy-eared looking person. So he wouldn't be able to say that. Everybody else would have to explain that for him. But anyway, a big loss of the character. I do hope he comes back in the season, or at least at the end of the season for season 3. It would be really, really interesting. You did mention Q there, Chris. I'll pop in with my prime directive, just because I love that moment with Rafi attacking Picard. Q will be omnipresent for the season, even if he's not on screen. We only see a quick flash of him in here in this episode, where he's saying to Picard, this is how you like it, isn't it? This is you back at the helm of an adventure, effectively. And that's it. That's the only moment that we have of Q in the episode. But the attack from Rafi on Picard and what his relationship is with Q, I thought was really interesting in this episode. Effectively, Rafi saying to him, you and Q play your games. That's all you're doing, and everybody else pays the price around you. So while you're saying that we do have Q and he could give a prize of bringing back Elnor, that's a very unlikely thing for Q to do. It's kind of, that's the penalty you have paid. would be more what Q would do with Picard. You played the game and you lost one of your crewmen. That's your punishment almost for doing this experience. But I love that Rafi calls out Picard for allowing Q to play games, for allowing him to set these scenarios up for Picard to prove who he is to Q.
But does he allow him? I mean, I think that's, for me, this is great. I mean, Rafi talks, she is disappointed in Picard. I love how she says, I have, really trying to rein it in, the emotion and still, maintain, some kind of sort of calm, where she says, I have a profound disappointment in leadership.
Absolutely.
But I do feel she's ultimately blaming Q, but it involves Picard, because that's who he is always directing his games on.
Exactly.
And he goes along with it. Now, whether he fully has a choice in that, and Picard is always, like we saw at the start of episode 2 and the end of episode 1, he doesn't like doing this. He doesn't like the games himself. Now, he might by the end of it, and maybe there's that twisted side in Picard that does like the games, for sure. But I agree. I like this attack on their games, because it does hold everything in the balance.
But I suppose that's what Rafi is getting at. She's saying this has been going on for decades. Yep. So while Picard can't stop an omnipotent being doing what an omnipotent being wants to do, it's almost that Batman Joker question. You know, Batman being attacked by Joker all the time for decades over and over again. Everybody's going, why didn't you kill him at some point? Why didn't you work out a way to take the Joker out for good? And that's Rafi's point. Picard, you've allowed this person to manipulate you, push everybody through these scenarios over and over again. Why didn't you work out a way to get rid of him for good at some point? You clearly enjoy these games that he plays. Picard doesn't believe that. Picard believes he has no choice in this. But at some point over these decades, Rafi is saying, why didn't you work out a way? You're one of the most intelligent people that everybody knows, but you've never worked out a way to get Q off your back forever. And it's now cost me my son, is what you said.
Yeah, exactly. No, I agree.
Yeah.
I honestly don't know if I disagree. And that's the scary part with like it is the Batman Joker, and that's that was the best way of describing it, because I hadn't kind of attached to that, but that is exactly what it is. And it's at a certain point, by like the 5th time, this man has killed many people and caused so much loss and suffering. At a certain point, you need to go, okay, you're a bad person. You may be omnipotent, but we're going to figure this stuff out.
Exactly. You
think about the emotion, just not even the physical, but the emotional turmoil that Q has put the cast of Next Generation through throughout their seasons and episodes and everything like that.
Yeah.
It's like to the point where like that last episode of the Next Generation, like alone. So you get to a point where like, I'm kind of on her side. And now there is a point where it's like Rafi is making very valid points. Picard will need to address them. And I think the addressing, unfortunately, probably won't be that. I don't know if Picard's going to have a good enough answer during, like, at this point, like, or maybe by the end, where he's like, I've had enough of these games. Like, this is the end of the game, the final game. Because we remember, this isn't the game. This is a consequence of the game, as per what Q has said. This is the consequence of their actions, not a new fun and game toy like test.
Well, exactly, and this is Rafi's point. So every time that Q has been involved in Picard's life in the past and his experience in the past, it's Picard being taken out of his situation, put through a test, and at the end of it, it comes back and Picard has had that experience, and pretty much other people haven't had that experience. So people have seen Q, people have interacted with Q, but it has been focused on Picard in the past. This one's different, and it feels like Picard's treating it like another process he has to go through. And at the end, if he plays the game properly, if to use that phrasing that's being used here, if he plays the game properly at the end of the game, it will all resolve and it'll be fine. But Rafi's point is this time it's different. We're all involved. Our lives are on the line and we've just lost Elnor. So
yeah, exactly.
So it's a really interesting question to pose. And Michelle Hurd is just acting out of her socks here.
Yeah, she's great. Yeah.
Really, really good. Really, really good moment. That's my prime director, my big moment from the episode. How about yourself, Chris? I think you've got the last big moment from the episode.
Yeah, I'm going to take it, and it's very much a 3 actors in a scene. It is Juratti interfacing and slowly assimilating to a degree with the Borg Queen. Now, some of the science parts of this, I'm not going to lie, went over my head.
Of course.
I was like, you're doing what now to do the what? Okay. But essentially, she is interfacing with the Borg Queen to steal some information, or to at least help the Borg Queen get the information. And what stood out for me was just the pure amazing acting between these two characters.
Yeah.
As like, she's in my anger center, and the lines around pushing Picard and getting his buttons, and then she's in the sorrow, and you see that the Juratti kind of wells up, and then just to the end where it's essentially the Borg Queen is even scarier because you haven't annoyed her, you piqued her interest in what Juratti has.
Love that.
And I was like, oh God.
Yeah.
What does that mean? Because and I know that's what the writers wanted to make us go, ooh, this is going to get interesting. Now Juratti is going to face the problem with the Borg Queen. But do you know where my head went straight away? The Borg Queen we see in episode 1 is that Juratti from now.
I was like,
because they literally had covered her face, and I was like, but why if we're already seeing the Borg Queen later? Because I think that's Juratti from this timeline come back in time, and she knows Picard's the only one, and she's slowly going to assimilate and become the next Borg Queen.
It's entirely possible. And remember, on that ship, she's the one that's calling out what the Borg Queen's doing, what systems she's attacking, all that kind of stuff. Yeah, there is a reason why that Borg Queen looks different and why she has a mask on. Well, effectively her entire body from head to toe, just in case.
Definitely.
But I love the idea that this could be Juratti in the future. Again, we mentioned she's a nervous, kind of innocent character, very intelligent, and very interesting now to the Borg Queen. So I love the idea that could be a big change for her. She could be the dark side in the future. So it does make me wonder whether this entire season now from here until the end of it is going to be in 2024 trying to fix this Q problem, or will they fix it and then have another bigger problem to deal with in the future for the rest of the season?
It'd be interesting. I mean, I think, Chris, totally with you. I love that whole sort of foreboding that happened with the, you've impressed a Borg Queen.
Yeah.
The other bit I really liked, as I said, as they go through anger and sadness and you see, this slow assimilation, and they say, the stronger we become, and then Picard disconnects and Juratti goes, whose hand is this? And then it's just mine, bouncing between Juratti and the Borg Queen.
Yeah.
And I thought that was just really, really slick. I love that.
Yeah. Yeah. The writing for this scene, again, really, really good, because they don't ever take away how dangerous this is to do. They set it up from the moment that the Borg Queen looks at Picard and calls him Locutus. They set it up that if he was the one to do this, he would be taken back over instantly, because she still has all the memories of how he was assimilated. It would be a really quick process. So it's almost a fight against time, and acted so well and written so well that, how long does it take the Borg Queen to assimilate someone? Is it 20 minutes? Okay, well then I'll do this in 19 minutes, 50 seconds, But what if they've got the timing wrong? What if this Borg Queen can assimilate people faster? Will Juratti be taken over completely, really quickly? You know, I love that they kept that tension and kept the danger in this scene just purely through the acting and writing. Really good.
Yeah. I think you've hit the nail on the head there. I think Juratti has to go back in and get something else. And the timeline, the timer we've already lost that X amount of time. So you're basically, the installation process is already starting at 50% or 80%. And I think in terms of the season, I think we spend the rest of the season on this Q back in time problem. Mm-hmm. And I think the big bad in the season 3 storyline is this potential Borg Queen Juratti thing. I think that'd be cool, because it ends at the beginning, because essentially you got this, they jump back in time, and then it's revealed that Juratti is the Borg Queen because of all these things. And then the race is on to fix the Juratti issue. And that's then your season 3, because it's already been, it's filmed, it's a tied link, we know, and then that's the arc. You have the introduction of Juratti. It's actually a Picard Juratti arc.
There you go.
From start to finish.
That would be very interesting. We forget that one of the biggest cliffhangers in the entire history of television was Picard becoming Locutus of Borg.
Yeah.
So potentially the kind of call back to that with Juratti possibly becoming the Borg Queen would be a really interesting way to set up the finale for season 2. Yeah, that would be really interesting. But all guesswork. Hopefully we're not spoiling anything for our wonderful fellow Trekkies and Trekkers, because we don't know. We have no idea how the show's going to end. But that's
if I did, I would be a millionaire. I think that's it. So before we move into our kind of overall thoughts and just a quick rundown, do we have anything else?
The only note I had from the episode was that I do love that version of California Dreaming that's playing as they arrive into LA. A real, a great version of a song, and a song that's always easily connected to LA. I always have that feeling when I hear that song of, I know exactly where I am now. It's a really good use of that song.
The only point I've got is I just like the little superhero reference from Seven as she transports in, and there's a kid there playing in the park, and she uses, I guess, even in 2024, the obsession with superheroes as the little sort of wink wink nudge nudge to ask the little girl to keep it secret what she's just seen. So,
that's like really cool.
Because there always does need to be someone that sees them. And
yeah, of course.
I just, I guess it's not going to play out any further, but it's that idea that she becomes something important in the future because of what she's seen.
Yeah, that's really nice. Yeah, really nice. We didn't mention it, that kind of in the death of Elnor scene. Just one other thing to mention about it, just his mantra, or his idea that of the way he lives his life is now is the only moment. Now, where we are right now in this moment is the only important thing, and that's the final line he says to Rafi before he dies. I thought that was a really beautiful scene. Yeah, beautiful moment.
There it is.
Great. Yeah. No, 100%. Nothing from my side, so I think that's it then, gentlemen. I think it's time to give our final thoughts and feelings on episode 3 of season 2 of Star Trek Picard, entitled Assimilation. John, what were your thoughts?
I really loved this episode. I mean, interestingly, I think when I first watched it, I thought it was quite short, quite simple. But in terms of our discussion here today, it's accelerated beyond, I guess, what I was originally thinking I would score this, to be honest. I would give this 4.5 Borg legs out of 5. I really enjoyed it. Significant impact here with Elnor's death and how that drives everyone on. The great assimilation scene with Juratti, Picard, and the Borg Queen. There is the whole commentary, at least the initial commentary, on Earth 2024, and loads of different, potential threads that will flow out from this. Yeah. So really, like the Borg Queen's own tentacles, a lot of tentacles are shooting out from this episode, I think, for the remainder of the series. And, so I would give this 4.5 Borg legs out of 5.
Excellent.
I love that. If only she had legs.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Derek, what are your thoughts?
I think shared a lot of our thoughts about the episode, but overall, loved this one. And I think, John, you're right. I think actually discussing it and thinking about what happened in the episode has made me appreciate it even more than I did when watching it. I'm really looking forward to see how all these threads spread out across the season, even just those simple stories of what's happening in 2024. How is Rios going to get back together with Seven and Rafi? That's interesting enough as a story, but there's so many other bigger threads that they could take on into the rest of the show, which is always exciting when you're watching an episode of Star Trek. Chris, how about yourself?
I'm going to echo pretty much everything we've said here, and plus what we kind of talked about. Very similar to John, my initial first viewing of this whole episode, I was like, really? That's how they're going to do this, and that's how they're going to do it dirty to kind of Elnor. And I think it's through the second watch, and then actually through our discussion, I'm like, okay, this is going to be. It's that defining moment. It's that death of Tasha moment, which kind of is referenced potentially into the future and can really just bring the team together and overall just kind of solidify a single crystallizing moment in the season. And it's only when you look back at that and kind of go, oh, okay, well, that was the point that it drives X, Y, Z forward. Then that's great. It was that initial first bit. I was like, okay, well, let's. And that's the thing. They delivered in a really good conclusion in season 1. And I was kind of happy with how it all kind of overall just kind of ended and kind of was pulled together. So I'm very much at this point, all right, like, tell me the rest of the story.
Yeah.
You've now got 4 episodes or 5 episodes left to completely solidify and tell me why this overall death was important.
Yeah.
So, overall, really enjoyed it. I think more so on the second viewing and more so through our discussion.
Excellent.
But there we have it. I really need a drink.
Mm-hmm. Yes, me too.
To pour one out for our homie, our Romulan homie. So let's head on over to 10 Forward.
Mm-hmm. Yes, it is the 10 Forward pub quiz, fellow quizzers and fellow trekkers. This episode's question is, what cookies does Rios try and bribe the child with in order to get his communication badge back?
I like it. I'm liking that there's lots of food and drink questions in your 10 Forward pub quiz this season.
Hopefully there'll be what bar snack do at some point in the future. But yes, please send in your answers to the 10 Forward pub quiz questions for this series of Picard to feedback@tvpodcastindustries.com. You can send them in one at a time or all together right at the end of the series. Mm-hmm. Just to give you that pub quiz question once more. What cookies does Rios try and bribe the child with in order to get his communication badge back?
Excellent. And remember, you can get your hands on some Picard goodies if you get all the questions right. And the one that pulled out of the hat at the end of the season. Looking forward to getting all your answers in as the season goes on. Thanks so much for that, John.
Yes. So make sure you get your answers in on the back of a postcard to feedback@tvpodcastindustries to be in with a chance to potentially win a few Picard-themed goodies. There we have it. So, gentlemen, I want to hear what everyone else thought of episodes 1 and 2 of Picard so far. So let's jump into some feedback.
Thanks, Chris. We've gone into the future again with our feedback section. Just myself and John here for this one.
Yes. Hello, fellow Trekkies. We're here for feedback.
Yes. Firstly, very, very happy St. Patrick's Day to everybody.
Yeah. Happy St. Patrick's Day, everyone.
Yes. Always like to celebrate St. Patrick's Day in 10 Forward with our Irish podcast.
Yes, with our Guinness.
Exactly. Need to get a couple of cans of that in for the day. Let's get into some feedback. First up, we had an email from Victor Von Doom on episode 2. He says, "Greetings, Trekkies. Once again, Star Trek has brought a story fitting with the current and upcoming events of our world. Q must not be well at all. He struck Picard. Who is really doing the penance here, though? Is it Picard or Q or both? I was thrilled with the Deep Space Nine references, such as the mention of General Sisko, Dukat, and Martok in this episode. Obviously, Worf did not serve on the Enterprise in this timeline. Well, of course.
That's true, yeah.
There was a battle with the Klingons, or if they were all wiped out. Worf may have even been wiped out before he went on to the Enterprise, actually.
I would suspect he was never on the Enterprise because he's not human.
Well, exactly. This is an entire universe where only humans would be on the Confederation ships, of course. Victor continues, Annika's marriage must be of a political nature. I mean, that dude, no way would she marry him. Agnes and Seven really shine in this episode. Also nice to see Picard getting the whole band back together. I'm curious as to Soji's status. Is she even part of this timeline? Despite his condition, Q has mixed in the old time travel and alternate universe cards marvellously. Peace and love, Victor Von Doom.
Excellent stuff. Thank you, Victor. Yeah, I love that the band is back together and seeing Picard do that. I think on Soji's status, there are obviously synthetics in this world. We see General Picard's synthetic valet here. So it's a question of to what scope and how she is in this world, potentially, I guess.
And didn't they also mention that Picard's body is synthetic because of an attack from General Martok? So, or Gul Dukat, it was one of the two that they said that that's why he has a synthetic body. In the other timeline, Soji is the product of those types of synthetic bodies. So it's entirely possible we're going to see Soji in some way in the future. Now, we are here in this episode, in episode 3, we've traveled back in time now, so we're not seeing what's going on in that alternate timeline anymore. So it's just entirely possible that we could see that Soji did have some kind of impact in that world, and that's why we didn't see her in there, because it's a bigger impact, maybe.
Yeah, and we do see Dr. Soong as well.
That's right.
In the kind of panning shot of San Francisco in the world of the Confederation.
Yeah, exactly. And a nice, interesting thing to pull in here that I learned when these episodes started coming out. The husband of Annika in this timeline, the president's husband, is played by Issa Briones' father. So Soji, who was played by Issa Briones in the first season, her father is playing Annika's husband.
Ah, excellent.
So isn't that really interesting? Now, I don't know whether there's any connection going to be brought into the show at all about that, but I just think it's really interesting that they brought him on board in a significant role when Soji doesn't have a role so far this season, other than the little moment at the beginning of the season.
Yeah, excellent stuff. Thanks, Victor, for the feedback. We also got some Facebook feedback on episode 2 as well. Dan Lee says, that was a heck of an episode, although I think I missed out for not being a big Star Trek fan. Especially when Q was talking about the skulls. I only knew who one of the people mentioned was. Yeah, it really was, Dan. A great episode. And yes, the skulls, a big talking point. I guess they should be in everyone's homes. Really draws the eye into the decoration and fixtures of a room, I guess.
I'm not sure about slaughtering multiple species to have them up in your home.
I guess it's like rhino heads and all that kind of stuff on people's walls.
Yeah, still wouldn't appreciate doing that in our
Trying
home.
to show superiority, I guess.
Yeah, possibly. We're not doing it in our house, John. Definitely.
No, definitely not. Only stuffed heads here.
Exactly. Well,
fluffy toy
teddy
heads.
bears. Yeah. But yeah, I know that room did feel like a real Easter egg room, as we said. There was a little touch of it shown on the after show that's hosted by Will Wheaton, that did show that room and how it was built. And they went into a little bit of detail. You know, for example, the person that created the Ferengi head was weighing up whether the Ferengis would have bones in their ears or not, you know, that kind of stuff. It was a little bit of fun, but wasn't as deep dive into who every head was and what every weapon was. So we may be coming back to that room later on in the series, possibly.
Yeah, we could be. Yeah. Will who?
Will Wheaton. Yes.
Very good.
I know you love that, John.
Jamie Lawson also says on Facebook, first skull was Ferengi, which could be a reference to his first action on the Stargazer when it was attacked by the Ferengi at the Battle of Maxia, and he came up with the Picard maneuver as referenced in the Next Generation episode, The Battle.
Oh, very good, Jamie.
Good stuff.
Very good. We also heard reference to the Picard maneuver itself in the show as well from, for I think it was the final episode of season 1, when they were taking over the ship and they were going into battle. Juratti's asking him, does he want to call his new maneuver the Picard maneuver, and then realizes, oh, that's in the handbook. There already is a Picard maneuver. So that would be a nice little tie-in as well, but that's cool that it ties into the Stargazer, given the importance of the Stargazer in the show.
Definitely. Yeah. Thanks, Jamie, and thanks, Dan, for your thoughts there. Really good.
Absolutely. Heather Wallace also shared some thoughts over on Facebook as well. She said, I just finished watching this episode and came to hear your thoughts. Love Q being meta and an audience stand-in, particularly the name drops for yesterday's Enterprise and the Mirror Universe. I was waiting for a reference to Tapestry, which is one of the other times he interfered with Jean-Luc's timeline. Yesterday's Enterprise isn't a Mirror Universe episode. The timeline had been changed and only Guinan was aware something was different. It was a causal loop. History changes because the older Enterprise went through the time anomaly to the present day, and history was only restored by it completing its loop of going back in time. Although I do like Derek's point that Mirror Universe episodes aren't about our heroes trying to change anything, they just want to survive and get back to their own universe. I like that too, because it always feels like it's an even more dangerous universe, because it's like all the Star Trek characters are throwing their hands up going, well, I can't fix this. I just want to get out of here alive.
Yeah, absolutely.
Heather says, the Macbeth reference brought back the wonderful memory of seeing Patrick Stewart perform that role on Broadway in 2008. He was so good in it. I read that he approached the role as if he was one of the aging Russian generals at the collapse of the USSR vying for power. Such a wonderful actor. I've never seen him on stage.
Really good. Absolutely. Yeah. And interestingly, in a recent interview with Patrick Stewart, I think it was for the Guardian newspaper, one of the roles from Shakespeare that he hasn't done is King Lear.
Oh, yeah.
That he would love to do. But because now of his age and the length of production runs in a week, for the production to be successful or at least make money, then he's not entirely sure whether he could wrangle it to do just 6 shows of King Lear in a week, or whether he'd have to do, I think it was the 8 or 10.
Oh,
but,
wow.
you know, he says it's one of the things that he hasn't actually done in the Shakespeare wheelhouse.
Oh,
interesting.
I smell a movie version coming up instead, where they were kind of. What do you think? Heather continues, as creepy as the skulls were, I was hoping just a teensy bit that one would be Gul Madred, the Cardassian that tortured Picard in Chain of Command. Ooh, how many lights are there, John?
4 lights.
I see 4 lights. Nice. That would be so good and such great payback, I suppose, for our Picard, if he had to take the head of Gul Madred. But I presume General Picard just never got into that situation with Gul Madred. I guess that's what it is. But it would have been just lovely to see that as a little nod to it. Heather says, I love Elnor and Rafi's parental relationship. So sweet how she protects him, and also how open he is with hugging his friends when they're reunited.
Yes, definitely. His absolute candor is not necessarily best placed for the subterfuge that this group have to do, given the eyes of the Confederation are everywhere.
Absolutely. Heather says, I'm also enjoying the variety of Romulan accents. I like imagining that Alaris is a fan of Ballycus Angel and Elnor had a secret stash of very, very old Wiggles, Bananas and Pajamas and Bluey recordings. Aussie Romulans and Irish Romulans. Rafi and Elnor were on the Excelsior when the Stargazer self-destructed. It was nearby, but was Q just looking for anyone in the vicinity with a connection to Picard to send along? That is one of the open questions that I have as well, Heather, that the idea of why is it that it's only Picard's core group of people that are brought along by Q into this alternate timeline, especially ones that are on different ships at the time, you know? So why did he bring along all of these people alone? And it does seem to be because this is punishment for Picard. So of course it would be his closest people that they bring along, not just anybody that happened to be on the Stargazer when the attack was happening.
That's true. That is true. I mean, I was saying that even if they did all come along, it wouldn't be that they were necessarily trying to meet up. They wouldn't know what was going on. They could have been captured by the Confederation.
Possibly, yeah.
I think it is now just simply it's those with a close connection to Picard.
Yeah, it feels like they're the only ones that were pulled in, because you'd probably see Rios going after his crew, trying to find his crew in this alternate timeline if they had been pulled through. It is his crew of the Stargazer, exactly. So he'd probably be quite beholden to finding them. So I'm sure that's something we'll find out in future when we get more of what Q's plan actually is. Finally, Heather says, sorry for the long post, but it is interesting that the ranks are changed from Navy to Army ranks. Admiral and General are the same rank, as are Navy Captain and Army Colonel. Rios's new rank. I know in the show it's meant to show how militaristic the Confederation is, but the Navy is still part of the military, and in the case of the British Empire, responsible for plenty of invasions. That's very true. It's very true. But it is, I think that's something that I thought pointed to the fact that this is the mirror universe, because I think in the mirror universe they have the ranks are all army ranks, and in the regular universe of Star Trek that we know, all of those ranks are coming from Navy ranks. So I always thought that was the differentiator, but not here, not in this case.
Yeah, no, that's true. I mean, it's interesting, isn't it? Because it's talked about as a fleet.
Yeah.
Then it makes sense for the Navy ranks. It's anyone from the Navy or Army or scientists going into that, but I think also it's quite heavily focused around the air forces.
Yes,
so,
that's true.
Again, a very different kind of idea, but
yeah,
it's. I think it's just to make that difference. I guess you sometimes the army is that grunt of the force, you know.
Okay,
I'm not necessarily saying that maybe correct, but you know they're the boots on land.
Yeah, I get you. Yeah,
you know, attacking, colonizing, and so on. Yeah. And sometimes air and naval are seen as support functions for that in terms of supply, in terms of landings, and that kind of thing.
Yeah, it's also very rare that you'd have an airplane traveling around the world over and over again with a whole crew that are on there all the time, whereas I think with Gene Roddenberry's Trek, the original version of it was kind of, he was equating it to the Navy because a whole Navy ship going out and exploring.
An exploration during the time of sail, then it did take that long.
Yeah, exactly. Very interesting thoughts from you there, Heather. Thanks so much for sending in your thoughts, and thanks to everybody else who sent in their emails and messages to us. We'd love to hear more from you about the rest of the season. Please make sure you keep emailing us to feedback@TV Podcast Industries, or go onto our Facebook group at facebook.com/groups/TV Podcast Industries.
Yes, thanks so much, Heather.
Our final piece of feedback for this week comes in from Matt Murdoch with the second part of his music analysis for the theme of Star Trek Picard this season. I really enjoyed part one of Matt's thoughts. Looking forward to hearing part two.
Yes, indeed. Take it away, Matt.
Hello, John, Derek, and Chris. Just wanted to say I really enjoyed episode 2 of season 2. Last time around, I talked about how one part of the Picard theme from season 1 was changed harmonically in order to create a darker sounding theme or a more tense kind of theme. And I didn't get to the second part, the main melody, so I thought I'd do that this time. Once again, a snippet of the main melody. It sounds like this. And the way that we primarily heard that being harmonized was with a stringed instrument, but it was also done in a very major chord kind of way. Major chords tend to make us feel happy. Minor chords tend to make us feel more tense or darker. And the season 1 theme was primarily happier. So most of the time the melody was harmonized like this. And as you get to the end of the season 2 version of the theme, you get that again. But that's not the first way you hear that melody phrased. In fact, you hear that melody phrased 2 entirely different ways before that final phrasing that sounds like that. First, you get it with those same kind of staccato string lines that create tension the same way I discussed last time. You get it phrased over this. The same kind of harmony uses, the use of that tritone to create tension, is in this phrasing as well. And that makes it feel like it needs to go somewhere, but because we're locked in, we can't. And that makes us feel uncomfortable as human beings. And there was another more legato way of phrasing it with the cello as well, but it went lower than the harmony implied over the top of it, and the harmony was different. Rather than centering on what we call the one chord, which tends to make things sound happier in this particular case of a key, it was centered around the minor 6 chord. And these numbers aren't important really, but what you need to know is that it then kind of juxtaposes this melody over minor sounds, which tend to sound darker, like this. And one of the things rhythmically that I found interesting was that staccato separation in both of those instances. Legato tends to make things feel smooth, like an ice skater skating over the ice, whereas staccato feels very short, and you can almost think of it like a conversation, like somebody being very short with you. It creates tension, and that's what these little jabs of chords do, as opposed to long chords being held out. So you have both the minor harmonization and the staccato making this theme darker than it was in the season 1 version. And I'm just going to point out really quickly the 2 differences at the end of each of these themes. At the end of the season 1 version, we got a little snippet of the melody from the Star Trek The Next Generation theme. At the end in the flute of season 1, you get this. Now, at the end of the season 2 version, you get something that's also been incorporated into what we think of as Star Trek Next Generation as well, but it actually originated, I believe, from the Star Trek movies, or maybe even the original series. I'm having trouble remembering now. But the end of the season 2 theme ends with this. And to me, it's kind of interesting that Mr. Russo chose this, because this season seems to be focusing on the past. They have to go back to the past to change something, or to fix something, I suppose. Or it could just be the fact that Russo likes using little snippets of the original melodies at the end of his pieces. Anyway, that's all I've got, guys. Really enjoyed episode 2. Looking forward to episode 3. Take care.
That's great stuff, Matt. Really, really enjoyed that. Just as you say, the confined on edge element that the staccato brings to this, and just the added tension and darkness, or you know, something not feeling quite right.
Exactly.
And certainly when you compare it as you did there with the season 1, which was much more kind of warm and fuzzy. So yeah, that was really, really good stuff. Really enjoy, your musical, analysis and takes on the shows that we cover. Really, really good. Yeah.
Absolutely. Thanks so much, Matt, for that. And that was really interesting that you're pointing out about the changeover from the Next Generation theme that we knew from season 1 into the original Star Trek theme tune. That's really interesting. That's how the original theme tune started, as far as I remember, before we get the soprano coming in and singing, that bit that everybody used to sing along to on TV. I'm not going to sing along to it because I can't. It's too high. It's too high for me.
That's it. There's the original, theme tune when Gene Roddenberry's name comes up, but also, there's the Next Generation as well.
Yeah. Very cool. Thanks so much, Matt. And thanks everybody again for your feedback. Keep sending it in. We'll go back in time to me, John, and Chris to say goodbye. Back in time. See, it's time travel, John. That's almost the Star Trek original theme tune.
Exactly.
Right. Bye.
Bye.
It's time to wrap up this episode and move forward into finding the Watcher in episode 4 of Picard. If people really enjoying it, they can head on over to tvpodcastindustries.com and subscribe to each and every episode of our shows. Don't forget, recently we just covered all of The Boys. Diabolical. It was good. It was diabolically good.
It was.
Some may say.
It was a very different show, definitely, to Picard, and not for kids, I would say.
Even though it is Laser Baby's day out.
That was even that was pretty brutal.
Yes, it was.
Yeah, lots of blood and lots of gore in that show, but a very different show. And we tend to cover very different shows on TV Podcast Industries. But as Chris said, you can get access to all of those episodes at tvpodcastindustries.com. You can also join us over in our Facebook group at facebook.com/groups/TV Podcast Industries if you want to chat with us about any of the episodes that you've been watching or any of the episodes that we've been covering. Thanks so much for joining us for this episode. We'll talk to you again next time.
Yes, and if, like Rafi, you have a few extra US dollars in your pocket because you've knocked out some guy trying to mug you, don't forget to head on over to patreon.com/TV Podcast Industry, where you can give us a few US dollars just to help us keep the lights on and help keep the podcast engine running. You can also keep our producer extraordinaire in coffee by heading on to buymeacoffee.com/TVPI, and for just a one-off payment, get him a coffee. Much appreciated. But we do know that in this other timeline, it could also be a dark Colombian roast or an Earl Grey, hot or cold, depending on your tipple choices.
Excellent. Thanks so much. Speak to you again next time.
Yeah, speak to you again soon. Thanks so much. Bye.
Yes, thanks so much, fellow Trekkies, for joining us. Remember, keep watching, keep listening, and keep trekking. Bye.